Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
I think that crowdfunding is going to be absolutely massive in terms of its impact on my business, which is the financing of entrepreneurship. But I think its implications in society are much broader than just impacting the financing of entrepreneurship. Is that it really enables us at our fundamental level as a society, as a group of people, to take collective action. What more could be more important than what you care about, the causes that are near to your heart? You channel your money towards that, right? And if you think about that at a fundamental level, that's what government is supposed to do. Society comes together and channels its money towards a certain social economic paradigm or structure. And that's what government does. And so I think whereas over the past 60 years, government has been that glue, that force for social action, the collective action or collective exchange has been delivered through government. I think that's really going to change. I think that we can see that we can take collective action through forces like crowdfunding and other digital media, and we can channel our money, our thoughts, our networks, and so forth. And I think that the impact on that is going to be significant in this new common sense which is emerging. Because if you fast forward, you know that Wayne Gretzky quote, which is, a good hockey player plays to where the puck is, but a great hockey player plays to where the puck's going. So if we fast forward 30 years and think about how important crowdfunding is in our lives today, in 30 years' time, it's just going to be like the oxygen that we breathe. It's just not going to be something new. We won't be coming to an event to talk about it. It will be everybody doing it constantly. And I think if you roll that back to the present, what that means is that there's going to be just a de facto reduction or diminishing in the role of things like government in the way that it's currently structured, because we're going to feel that we can bring about that change in our neighborhoods. I live in Earl's Court, and the people of Earl's Court are going to decide how the people of Earl's Court want to live, and we're going to channel our local money to fixing social problems, and we're not going to need to feel that we need to, elect people to go and figure it out for us. We're going to say, you know what, we can figure this out, we can do it locally.
I'm very positive about crowdfunding. I think the global forecast is that in 2013, something like $6 billion will be raised through crowdfunding. Initially, I thought of it very much for environmental causes, clearly social enterprise, very much looking at crowdfunding, the arts increasingly, but also small businesses, an extremely interesting area because, as you will know with small business, not only does it have problems on the debt side, but the equity layer is absolutely critical for small businesses. And we're at a point where the growth of those businesses will need sources of capital and need them soon. And conventional sources do not seem to be available. This is going to be a very significant new mechanism. And I must say in this country, one of the things we have tried to take on is how do we then provide an appropriate regulatory framework? And the FCA has been looking at that. I think it's now 2 approved equity platforms. But there's a lot of caution in the FCA. And I do think we have to look at our regulator and make sure they start taking a very serious look at this, because they need to be an enabler. But I want to add a note of caution. Crowdfunding is very much flavour of the month. I mean, a year ago, it'd be tough to find a government minister who knew what you were talking about. Now, every one of them thinks that crowdfunding is clearly the answer to whatever problem has just come their way, and particularly the lack of capital. It is just awful. So the problem is, we may be facing excessive expectations. Although it's growing, it's still small. It's not going to answer every need. It's going to be one of a diverse set of sources, and it can't carry the burden in and of itself. And I think a couple of attempts very recently to raise crowdfunding money that haven't met their target probably are an example. This is going to take time, and it's only going to be part of the picture. But as I say, it has a role to play. I'm also very keen on diversity, so I'm slightly concerned when you hear that Santander, for example, is looking at investing in something like a peer-to-peer-like funding circle. So, I think we've got to watch that the institutional giants don't suddenly look at this, say, hang on, this is real, this is money, and start to begin to try and take it over. Again, as businesses, social enterprise get involved in raising equity, do they have the legal and accounting background and advice available to be able to do that properly? We're going to have to develop that. Are we going to develop a secondary market that might provide some liquidity that reduces risk? And how will we deal with the media? Because, as I say, at the moment, crowdfunding is the darling. There's the odd warning when you read when you read a media article. But if there are some failed, businesses fail, social enterprises fail, stuff fails, and it has to. It's part of a healthy economy. But when that happens, will the media be able to accept it rather than very superficially damn the industry as a whole? And then we've got to deal with this issue of sophisticated investors, and it's a very difficult question. Some of the, the proposals that I've seen go out quite specifically say we're only looking for sophisticated investors who can understand the risks of this particular project. And that's absolutely, I think, entirely appropriate. But it varies enormously. If you're doing this on a very small scale and it's something very local, your sophisticated investor might be somebody who lives locally, who might use it, who might know about housing in your local community, or other kinds of services in your community, or a hydro dam project in your community in local demand. So they might be sophisticated in a way that is not conventionally understood. And how do we get those people enabled to play in this arena effectively? So a lot of stuff going on here. Questions too about the tax issues. How do you get ISA wraparounds? All kinds of issues around with all of that are going to make this absolutely fascinating. But I come back and say, to me, this is part of the disintermediation of the big financial institutions that we've lived with now for a generation. I think it's going to be an absolutely key player. And I'm here today very much to listen because I have to learn.
I just wanted to briefly share with you the story of a guy called David. David hates his leg. David doesn't just dislike his leg, his right leg. He really dislikes his right leg. In fact, he dislikes it so much he tried to amputate it on several occasions. The condition that David suffers from, which is called body identity integrity disorder, his brain is telling his body that his leg is wrong, his leg is alien. So we went and followed David to tell his story. And the only reason we were able to do that was because of crowdfunding. A couple of years ago, my co-founder Jim and I were sitting around bemoaning the state of journalism and how we couldn't tell the sort of stories we wanted to. And so we decided to try and do something about it. So the first thing we did was went to Kickstarter, and we ran a campaign there. We had very little to show to people apart from identifying a problem and saying that we wanted to fix it. It turned out lots of people thought the same thing because we raised $140,000 in a matter of days on Kickstarter and gathered 2,500 readers and subscribers before we'd even started. So we launched a company off the back of this called Matter. And Kickstarter was really our smoke test, was something that we thought was in the public good, but also a private service that we wanted to provide. Was there a space in the market for that? And we discovered there was. We grew the company. We started publishing last year. We have won 2 awards for the stories we published, and we were the first company that was started out of Kickstarter that got acquired. It seems to me like crowdfunding offers a few really important things that we should be thinking about. And one is, resurrecting the idea of patronage or micro-patronage, I suppose, because you can give tiny, tiny amounts. And this is something that historically has always been there, but sort of got eroded and ripped apart by the way the mass market developed. And, big products that cover everybody are more profitable. But profit isn't the only thing anyone's in it for. There's also a really important thing about turning followers into funders, turning people who are interested but don't have a way to realize that interest, turning that latent value into something you can use. And that's not necessarily financial. That can also be in terms of their interest, their participation. And crowdfunding is a great beacon for that stuff. And I think also we should think about crowdfunding as a potential corrective to the sort of the way that the free market distorts and warps product and perception over time. I used to work for The Guardian for a decade, which was a place which does some great journalism. Even there we had the same problems. We had limitations. We couldn't tell the stories I wanted to tell, which is why I left and went and did it myself. I think one of the things I really want everyone to think about in the room is crowdfunding as a building block towards sustainability, not a stunt. You know, so much crowdfunding is one-off. It's, you know, somebody does something, it's a project, it launches, it happens, it's gone. But I think if crowdfunding is going to be that thing that's around for the next 20, 30 years, it has to be about a way of filling that gap that allows people to build sustainable businesses or develop sustainable ideas. So I don't actually think crowdfunding is the future, but I think it's a way to help us, give us enough time to work out what the future is going to be, to help us shape it and find out what it will look like and build it around the things that we really care about, not the things that we're told to care about.
Firstly, the sector's growing, and it's really exciting that it's growing. There are some growing pains. So a couple months ago, I think Kickstarter issued an edict saying that you couldn't give out GM crops as a reward, which I could never see coming as a problem. But in a way, it's a sign of their growth that they're facing this problem. Similarly, we're learning a lot about how much people can actually raise. I'm not sure we've quite figured out yet what the sort of optimum size of projects are, how big you can really go. And it's really interesting to see different people get into this space. Baroness Kramer's mentioned equity crowdfunding. This is a really complicated question. Higher barriers to entry. So if you're trying to fund a project through an equity crowdfunding site, it's a lot more difficult to do that because of the protection around equity and the need to know a lot more about the people who are giving money so that they're not going to give, in effect, too much on what is a high-risk proposition. As Baroness Kramer said, the regulatory space is evolving rapidly. Some would say not rapidly enough. But there's a debate there. I think it's a really interesting question, which we haven't raised so far, on equity crowdfunding, about if you're a company and go to the crowd, you're in a stroke, you're potentially adding 2,000 new shareholders to your company overnight, and you're a startup. It's a really weird space to be in. How do you develop the relationship with those 2,000? What are they in it for? What kind of a return do you get off a £50 stake in a company, say, or a £100 stake in a company? So who are the crowd investors for equity? Looking to the future and wrapping up, I think what's really exciting about this space is not just about crowdfunding, it's about what we've learned about communities, and several other panel members have mentioned this already. Crowdfunding works when you have a community behind it, not just having a great idea. Kickstarter, in a sense, has created a really interesting large community. Other platforms are trying it in a more specific way around, for instance, science projects or student funding projects who we've supported through the RSA. And I think that's the thing that's going to be really interesting to test. We're going to learn a lot more about communities and how communities come together to do things, which is why, while I'm excited about crowdfunding, I'm also excited about what they're doing in San Francisco at the minute on participatory budgeting, which is fascinating, about giving people a very direct say in how they're spending their money. I'm also excited about how communities could come together to form different investment bonds and how that may happen more in the future, so that if we, as a 200-person group, said, right, we need to build something next door here, in theory, we could put money into a vehicle as debt and get it back as a loan. I'm not sure we're quite there yet in being able to do it or bringing it about, but I think there are some fascinating possibilities.
How strong does the relationship need to be between crowdfunding and a kind of set of values, a kind of ways of doing things? If you think of open source computing, if you think of Wikipedia, these institutional innovations carried with them quite a lot of kind of baggage in relation to values and ways of doing things, and protected those for a long time in order to get the innovation. Or is crowdfunding just there for whoever wants to use it in order to raise money for whatever they want to raise money for, and we shouldn't get too kind of heavy about it?
And Dana Renkelman, who is the founder of Indiegogo, which is the competitor to Kickstarter, I met her at a Guardian event not too long ago, and I think I tend to agree with her view that it's less about, although it is values-driven crowdfunding now, but really this is about making markets. And what drives her and what really drove the creation of Indiegogo was that she was an investment banker, although a young one, when she was 23, and she was very interested in the film and the arts and so forth. But she saw so much money being spent in ways that there really wasn't a market. And that's very relevant to the venture community that I'm a part of. Because basically, you've got a couple of guys, and it typically is guys, and their hunches, right? They've been given a lot of money from pension funds, and their hunch and a bit of analysis and whether they think the entrepreneur has the chutzpah to do it, but they don't really know if there's a market there. And so what I think we're going to see is the Indiegogos and the Kickstarters and the Crowdcubes and the Seeders really testing whether or not this idea, because what is a product except a consumer insight? You think that somebody is going to buy this. You think there's a market there. If there is no market, it really ought to die, because the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to fund something that will die at some future date. So better to kill it early than allow some sort of vision to escape the bottle and so forth. So I think crowdfunding is, again, just back into that fabric of the way we're going to test things and determine whether or not people want to buy what they sell. And I don't think it's going to end up being all that values driven. It's going to be really very kind of functional in terms of testing how people, it's going to be akin to marketing.
What is the one biggest thing that could stop the momentum of this crowdfunding movement or kind of turn it in the wrong direction? Bobby, first.
The basic one is something that undermines public confidence in small projects, scams, frauds. And we're already seeing those appear. Weirdly, it has only recently appeared. You know, you think it's a honeypot for scammers, really. But identity verification is kind of problematic. You know, you see an interesting idea and you want to throw it some money, but who the hell are these people? You know, and that's a big problem. And that's why the most successful people often plug into networks that they've already got, because their identity is already verified and their credentials are already there.
If we have a big equity crowdfunding scam, which we haven't had yet, that's going to be really difficult, because that's one where people have put serious money where they're expecting a return. They haven't let go of that money. They want something back for it. If we have a scam around that, that's going to be tough.
Susan?
When interest rates go back to normal, I think, you know, there's the social stuff that's going on that probably is not return-driven, but largely intent-driven. You know, they like the cause and they like what's being done, and that, I think, can survive almost anything. But the part that is money-driven, when you get a lot of, you know, when interest rates are back to normal and people reckon they can get good returns from relatively safe investments, then that's going to be a very interesting time for this industry.
So we're going to hear from the 7 projects going up in the RSA crowdfunding area of Kickstarter. First of all, welcome Bruce Newlands from MacLab London.
MacLab is a place where some extraordinary technology is made available to everyone and anyone to make almost anything. People can use digital fabrication technology to make everything from jewellery to low-cost housing systems. We've done it all already in Glasgow. We want to do it in London. I would ask that you pledge to our campaign, not for yourselves, but for any young people that you know, to give them a better chance to start their own business. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, please welcome Penny Hay, Artspace Bath.
Thank you. Bath needs a contemporary art centre. We need your help to help us launch a 4-day immersive creative event in order to have a proof of concept for a contemporary art centre in Bath, paving the way for bringing in international artists, local artists, and making the creativity visible in Bath. Thank you.
Please welcome Martin Webber from Clear Fear Game.
Thank you. I'm here to recruit superheroes and secret agents for the Secret Smiling Society. The Clear Fear Game is a real-life social game which brings people together to complete missions, conquer fear. It's a new approach to tackling social anxiety problems. We're raising money to take the game online to allow individuals to play it. The concept has been tested with the support of the RSA Catalyst Fund in groups, and now we want to play with you. So let's clear fear together. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Steve Ralph from Maru Cinema Project. And by the way, before Steve starts, Steve's been part of our Social Entrepreneurs Network, and if you're a social entrepreneur and you're not involved in it, you should be. Steve.
Thank you. The Meru Cinema project is about 3 things. It's about connectivity, culture and change. What we're looking to do is to take a large screen cinema, HD cinema to Meru, to support local filmmakers, to enable health and education videos to be shown to the community and to schools, and for people to do what we take for granted nearly every day of the year, which is to go to cinema and enjoy ourselves. Thanks very much.
3 to go. Please welcome Chris Gray and his Ugileo Field Trials. I hope that's right.
It's Ugileo. It's a Nepali word. It means light. And the idea is that we can empower people in Nepal to start businesses providing electric light for people who are currently burning oil. And this is a huge for-profit business. The oil companies make a fortune. And we want to put that money back into the local communities. So in order to test our assumptions and technology, we need to buy the technology and ship it. So we need your money.
Great,
so I'll see you downstairs, yeah?
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Rick Hall at 321 Ignition. Rick.
Thank you very much. 321 Ignition. You'll hear a lot about citizen science in the forthcoming year. But for the majority of citizens, science is hard, it's geeky, and it's not for the likes of us. 321 Ignition puts science on the high street between the bus station and the pound shop and makes it accessible, fun, and creative and responsive to the questions that the general public want to ask. We're looking for your support. We went live half an hour ago. Our target is now £4,499. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. And then finally, last but not least, Lisa Alton from the Student Makers Festival. Lisa.
Our Student Makers Markets bring young, creative people together to create vibrant mini-markets within established street markets, festivals and galleries. We want to extend this programme, and we have the opportunity to create a month-long pop-up shop and youth festival of entrepreneurship in Folkestone in December, and we need to raise the money. We have a building, it's an empty shell, we need to turn it into a fabulous pop-up space. We want to create a venue for our talks and our events, and importantly a production space so that the young people that don't have facilities can come and make their work, and also a fabulous launch event to thank everyone for helping us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.